Most humans are said to use only 10% of their brains, but what if someone could reach 100%? What begins as a simple mistake turns one ordinary woman into something beyond human.
Lucy is arguing outside a hotel with a man she's only been dating a short while, Richard. He's anxious and pressed for time, and he begs her to deliver a sealed briefcase to a contact named Mr. Jang in exchange for $500. When Lucy asks what's inside, Richard claims he doesn't know and insists it's probably just paperwork. Because the payout is far too generous for a job that simple, Lucy refuses, pointing out that no one pays that kind of money for a delivery that means nothing. So Richard handcuffs the briefcase to her wrist and tells her that only Mr. Jang holds the key to open it. With no way out and no way to remove the cuff herself, Lucy is forced to head into the building alone, while Richard waits outside, watching from a distance rather than walking in with her. Inside, a receptionist grills her about who sent her, what she's carrying, and who she's supposedly working for. Lucy gives Richard's name, but the man behind the desk claims he's never heard of anyone by that name, which only makes her more nervous. While she's being escorted upstairs under guard, a gunshot echoes from the lobby below. Richard has just been killed on the spot for sending an outsider into a deal this sensitive. Guards drag Lucy the rest of the way into an office, where two bloodied bodies already lie on the floor, and Mr. Zhang, a Taiwanese crime boss with his hands still stained red, steps out from a side room, wiping off a pair of surgical gloves. Through a translator, Lucy pleads that she has nothing to do with any of this and doesn't even know what's in the briefcase, but Zhang doesn't believe her and orders her to open it anyway. Trembling, she keys in a combination scrawled on a slip of paper and finds several sealed bags of a glowing blue crystalline substance packed inside. To test its potency, Zhang has his men drag in a badly wounded prisoner and forces him to inhale a small fragment of it. The man dissolves into hysterical, uncontrollable laughter within seconds, at which point Zhang shoots him dead in front of her without a flicker of hesitation. When Lucy refuses a job Zhang offers her immediately afterward, his head of security knocks her out cold with a single blow.
Meanwhile, at a Paris university, brain researcher Professor Samuel Norman is lecturing a packed auditorium on human cognitive potential. He explains that most animal species use only 3 to 5% of their brain's total capacity, while humans, sitting at the top of the food chain, average around 10%, with the one notable exception being dolphins, who use closer to 20% to power an echolocation system more precise than any man-made sonar. A student asks what a person could theoretically do with a much larger share of their own brain unlocked, and Norman admits candidly that nobody actually knows, because no human being has ever gotten the chance to find out. He adds that every living cell seems to be built around one basic goal, which is passing on the information it's gathered before it dies, either by reproducing or by simply surviving long enough to keep learning, a detail that becomes a lot more important by the end of the film. Zhang, it turns out, runs one of the largest synthetic drug operations in the region, and the blue substance is his newest and most valuable product yet, one he's convinced could be worth far more than anything his organization has ever moved before, provided he can get it into the right hands in Europe fast enough. That urgency is exactly why he's willing to use unwilling couriers like Lucy in the first place.
Lucy wakes up drugged in a hotel room with a fresh surgical incision across her stomach. Zhang's men explain that they've sewn a package of the blue substance, now identified as a synthetic drug called CPH4, directly into her abdomen, so she can smuggle roughly 1 kilogram of it into Europe without triggering any scanner. She's one of 4 couriers being flown out that same day, headed for Berlin, Rome, Paris, and, in Lucy's case, onward through Europe as well, each of them carrying an identical package sewn in the same way. Zhang hands out passports and tickets personally and warns all 4 that if any of them try to go to the police or dispose of the drugs, his organization already knows exactly where each of their families live. Lucy is chained up in a holding room afterward to wait out the hours before her flight. When one of her guards tries to assault her, she fights back hard enough to injure his hand, and in the struggle that follows, another guard beats her and kicks her hard enough in the stomach to rupture the package sewn inside her. The CPH4 floods directly into her bloodstream in a raw, uncontrolled dose. Her body convulses violently on the floor, her eyes flash an unnatural electric blue, and she begins to levitate off the ground entirely as the drug rewires her nervous system in real time, far faster than it was ever meant to be absorbed.
Once the convulsions finally pass, Lucy is disturbingly calm. It turns out she now has full conscious command of her own body, because pain, fear, and panic seem to have simply switched off inside her all at once. When a guard comes back to threaten her again, she disarms and kills him without a second thought, then methodically clears the rest of the building room by room with the same clinical detachment, taking down every armed man in her path. Before leaving, she raids a nearby weapons cache in the building, arms herself properly, and changes her appearance enough to avoid drawing attention on the street outside. Once she steps out into the neighborhood, she realizes she can now consciously tune her hearing the way a dolphin uses echolocation, isolating a single conversation out of dozens happening blocks away, simply by choosing to listen for it.
By this point, Lucy has reached roughly 20% brain capacity, which lines up almost exactly what Norman described in his lecture, enough to consciously override every basic bodily function, including heart rate, metabolism, and the body's own pain response. She hijacks a car and has the driver take her straight to the nearest hospital, where she walks into an operating room mid-surgery and shoots a dying patient on the table because his tumor is inoperable, and, in her words, keeping him alive any longer serves no purpose. She then orders the surgeons to remove the ruptured package from her own stomach without anesthesia, since she no longer needs it. While they operate, she calls her mother, not to explain any of what's happening, but just to thank her for raising her and to tell her she can now remember every sensation of her own life, all the way back to infancy, describing the taste of her mother's milk and the feeling of being held as a newborn in more detail than any adult memory should allow. Her mother, confused but touched, has no idea her daughter is on an operating table on the other side of the world as they speak. It's revealed during the surgery that CPH4 is a compound the human body already produces naturally in microscopic amounts during the 6th week of pregnancy to help form a fetus's bone structure. The surgeon removes close to 500 grams of it from her abdomen and admits he's never seen anywhere close to this concentration inside a living person, warning her that carrying this much should have killed her already several times over.
Once she's stable, Lucy tracks Jang down to a private spa, pins both of his hands to a table with 2 razor blades, and calmly pulls the shipping details of the other 3 couriers straight out of his memory with a single touch, no interrogation required. Jang, terrified and unable to move, tries threatening her the same way he threatens everyone else, but the tactic means nothing to someone who no longer feels fear the way he understands it, and she leaves him alive only because killing him isn't actually useful to her yet. She returns briefly to her own apartment afterwards, where her roommate is getting ready for a date and doesn't yet know anything about what Lucy has been through. Without looking up from her laptop, Lucy answers a question her roommate hasn't even finished asking yet, then hands her a set of documents written entirely in Chinese, a language she herself learned in the span of about an hour. It turns out the papers are a medical prescription because Lucy can already tell from looking at her that her roommate's kidneys and liver are failing and that she needs to change her habits immediately. Her roommate is left standing there stunned, unsure whether to be grateful or terrified.
Back at her apartment, she searches Professor Norman's published research online, all 6,734 pages of it, and absorbs the entire body of work in what feels like seconds. She calls him directly and tells him she's now at 28% brain capacity, that her cells are multiplying far faster than they should, and that she has no more than 24 hours left to live before her body gives out completely. Norman assumes at first that it's an elaborate prank call, until his own hotel television switches on by itself with Lucy's face already on the screen, describing the object sitting on his desk in exact detail.
Around the same time, Lucy phones French police captain Pierre Del Rio out of nowhere and dictates the precise travel details of the 3 other CPH-4 couriers, correctly describing objects on his desk that she has no way of actually seeing from where she is. The 3 men have no idea they're already being tracked. One is calmly checking in for his flight to Berlin, another is buying duty-free liquor ahead of his connection to Rome, and the third is arguing with an airline employee about a delayed boarding call, all completely unaware that armed officers are closing in on each of them at once. Because every detail Lucy provides checks out exactly, Pierre has all 3 men arrested at their departure dates before their flights ever leave the ground, seizing roughly a kilogram of CPH-4 from each of them. The arrests only make Zhang's crumbling operation more desperate, and he starts mobilizing every remaining man he has left to find her and recover what's been lost.
Soon after, Lucy boards a flight to Paris herself, working 2 laptops at once while decoding data and composing at a speed no human being should be capable of. Once she crosses roughly 40% capacity mid-flight, her body starts physically breaking down. Her teeth loosen in their sockets, her skin destabilizes at the edges because her cells are evolving faster than her physical body can structurally support. She locks herself in the bathroom and swallows the last of the raw CPH-4 she still has on her in one go, betting that more of the drug is the only thing left that can stabilize her before she falls apart completely mid-flight. She wakes up fully healed in a Paris hospital at around 50% capacity and walks straight past an armed guard, disarming anyone who points a weapon at her without breaking stride or so much as looking at them. After tracking down Pierre in person, she convinces him to hand the recovered CPH-4 packages over to her directly for safekeeping instead of holding them as evidence. She then takes the wheel of his car herself, despite never having driven before, and drives the wrong way through Paris traffic because it's faster, weaving through a crowded outdoor market and forcing a string of oncoming vehicles to swerve out of her path, while Pierre, strapped into the passenger seat against his will, decides it's safer not to argue with her.
When Zhang's men ambush the last surviving courier on a nearby street, executing one man who tries to run, Lucy arrives at around 60% capacity, enough to levitate an entire group of armed men and pin them to the ceiling without laying a hand on them, so she can calmly walk through and retrieve the last of the substance herself. Lucy and Pierre meet Norman at the same university where he gave his lecture at the start of the film, along with 2 of his fellow researchers who've been called in specifically to observe what's happening to her. As Lucy begins explaining to the room how her cells now communicate directly with matter itself, demonstrating by reshaping her own hand like clay, Zhang's assault team storms the building outside. It turns out, Zhang has already tracked her location through his remaining contacts and has sent close to a dozen armed men to retake what's left of his product, and gunfire erupts through the hallways as Pierre is left holding the entrance alone, buying the researchers time while heavily outnumbered and running low on ammunition. With time running out and her body beginning to fail again, Lucy decides the only way to survive is to push straight past the edge instead of trying to slow down. She has Norman's team inject her with the last of the pure CPH-4 intravenously while she wires herself directly into a bank of laboratory computers, pouring everything she now understands into the machines as her brain capacity climbs from 80% toward the full 100. As the dose takes hold, she begins to perceive the entire history of the universe compressing in front of her at once. Cities rising and crumbling, forests reclaiming empty streets, herds of animals and early humans flickering past,
all the way back to the very first spark of life on Earth billions of years earlier. Outside, a grenade blast tears through the lab in the middle of the firefight, but instead of killing her, it seems to accelerate whatever is already happening to her body. Jang finally corners her in the wreckage and fires point blank, only to find the chair already empty, her clothes the only thing left behind on the floor. He's still insisting it must be some kind of trick when Pierre shoots him dead where he stands. Moments later, a computer terminal in the room extends a mechanical arm, hands Norman a small black USB drive, and disintegrates completely, leaving no physical trace that either Lucy or the machine itself was ever really there. As Pierre stands in the ruined lab wondering where she actually went, his phone buzzes with a single text. Lucy hasn't died. She simply stopped being a person at all, having converted the whole of her body and everything she came to understand into something that now exists everywhere at once, leaving Norman holding the only physical trace of her left anywhere in the world. Afterward, Norman is left staring at the small drive in his hand, fully aware that whatever data Lucy chose to leave behind and whatever she decided humanity was ready to receive is now the only evidence that any of this ever happened at all. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you can watch more videos like this. Thanks for watching.